The most valuable class I took during my 200K Wharton MBA was negotiations. Today, I'm going to teach you the 5 most important lessons I learned, including the secret to not selling yourself short in any negotiation. I'm Hannah, and I help you thrive in your nonlinear career, whether you're thinking about a career pivot, grad school, a side hustle, or just taking a break. Negotiating is one of the most important skills you can build in a nonlinear career because it's what helps you get to the next step, ask for what you're worth, negotiate rates as a freelancer, and really build a life and career that work for you. And negotiating isn't some dirty corporate thing that businessmen do. You're always negotiating whether you realize it or not. If you've ever asked someone at work for a favor or just talked to your partner about where to go for the holidays, that's negotiating. In life, we don't get what we deserve, we get what we negotiate for. Before we get to business, first, I want to establish a ground rule. The reason why my negotiations class at Wharton worked so well was because we practiced every single week. Every week, the professor would assign us homework to prepare one side of a negotiation. Then we would come into class and negotiate live with a classmate until we reached a deal. I can't assign you homework, but it's really important to put these skills into practice. So I'll give you tips along the way to practice a lot of the things that we talk about today. The first thing we're going to talk about is BATNA, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. This is the secret to not selling yourself short in any negotiation. So in plain English, it's your plan B, your source of power, basically your fallback in case the negotiation doesn't work out. Before you walk into any negotiation, you need to know what this is for you. So let me give you a few examples. If you're negotiating a job offer, your BATNA could be other job offers you got, or just your ability to get more jobs because you have a kick-ass resume. If you're at your job and negotiating for higher pay or a different role or more flexibility, your BATNA could be your FU money or your side hustle that's really taking off, anything you'd fall back on. A strong BATNA gives you the power to ask for what you're worth. If you're negotiating something and you're not really sure what your BATNA is, it probably means you need to make it stronger or just get one in the first place. So if you're negotiating a job offer, that means you should go out and get some other offers or just really beef up your resume to make sure that you can get jobs. If you're negotiating a contract with a vendor at work, it's probably beneficial to get a few other quotes. So you might be asking, what is the difference between BATNA and leverage? They're related, but not quite the same thing. So let me explain. A strong BATNA can give you leverage, but your leverage doesn't always come from a BATNA. If that's confusing, let me give you an example. Let's say I'm negotiating a job offer. My BATNA or my plan B might be another offer that I have. But at the same time, if I'm coming from a competitor that the company hiring me really wants to know about, that's also my source of leverage, but it's not really a BATNA because it's not my plan B or my fallback. I love the concept of BATNA because you can use it outside of business negotiations too. So my practice tip for you is to think about how BATNA shows up in other aspects of your life. So if you're going on dates, your BATNA could be other Hinge or Bumble matches that you have, or just your ability to be happy on your own. Even something as simple as your friend invites you out on a Friday night, your BATNA could be staying at home curled up with a book, or in my case, my dog. I find that the more you think about this, the more it becomes natural to think about a BATNA when you're in a real negotiation. The second thing we're going to talk about today is an anchor or anchor value. This is one of the most important things that influences the economic outcome of a negotiation. It's usually the first offer that's thrown out in a negotiation, so the rest of the conversation is anchored around this number, kind of like a ship's anchor. Let me give you an example of why anchoring is important. Let's say you're going to buy a car and the salesperson says this car is $25,000. No matter what the real value of the car is or the value you had in mind, you're probably going to be negotiating around this number just because it's the first thing that someone threw out. So this begs the question, should you always make the first offer so you can anchor high, or should you wait for the first offer? And research shows that yes, you should make the first offer when you have a lot of information or research that serves as a basis for your high offer and you can easily explain it to your counterpart. However, if you don't have a lot of information or basis to back up your high offer, you should probably wait for your counterpart to make an offer first. This is normally the case in salary negotiations when you might not know the employer or the hiring manager's budget or what they're basing their offer around. When that happens, you need to be able to respond to a high offer. There are a couple ways you can do this. The best way is to ask questions like, what's the rationale for your offer? How did you get to that number? Open-ended questions that forces your counterpart to elaborate. Then once you have more facts, you can come back with another offer based on a different set of facts and criteria. So in the used car example, I could come back and say something like, based on my research on Carvana and CarMax and other used car sites, I think the value of this car is $10,000. So, and that way you change the anchor. Another thing you can do when you hear a very high or a very low anchor, anything that surprises you in a negotiation, you can do something called a flinch test. Whoa, I look weird doing that, but it's a physical gesture to show your counterpart that wow, you can't be serious about that offer, and there's some psychological benefits to doing that. So here's how you're gonna practice. The next time you go to ask for a vacation at work, especially if you're a little bit concerned that you're not gonna get all the days you ask for more days than you actually expect to get. So if you want a 7-day vacation, ask for 10 days and see what happens. The third thing we're gonna talk about is focusing on interests and not positions. So positions are what you come into a negotiation with, like, I want $50,000, and your interests are the underlying motivations for why you want that. Being able to separate interest from positions allows you to separate people from the problem and really get at creative solutions that work for everyone. Let me give you an example if that all sounds like fluff. Let's say I have an orange right now and I have two sisters who both want the orange. That's their position, they both want the orange. So what's the solution to this? I could give each sister half of the orange. I could give one sister an orange and the other one nothing. I could also flip a coin and see who wins the orange. Let's say I split the orange in half and gave one half to each sister. Now what happens? One sister eats half of the orange, but she's still hungry. And lo and behold, the other sister takes her half of the orange and uses the orange zest to make a cake. But she doesn't have enough zest for the cake because she only got half. So from this simple example, we can see that if we only knew the positions of the sisters and not their interests, we came up with a solution that didn't work for anyone. So how do you get at the underlying interest in a negotiation? The best way to do this is by asking open-ended questions that begin with how and what. Like, how did you arrive at that position? What's the approach you want to consider? Then use active listening and tactical empathy, mirroring their body language and their words to validate your counterpart and get them to elaborate more and tell you more about where they're coming from. This humanizes them, and really try to separate the people from the problem. Now it's practice time. This one's easy. The next time you get into an argument or just a disagreement with someone at work or your partner or your friend, think about what their position is versus what their underlying interest is. How can you use open-ended questions and empathy to get at their interests rather than focusing on their position and alienating them? Number 4, know your own and your counterpart's negotiation style. I love this one. There are 5 main types of negotiators: competing, collaborating, compromising, accommodating, and avoiding. Each one of these has strengths and weaknesses, so by knowing what you are and what your counterpart is, you can plan and negotiate better. I think a war strategist or something once said, know thy enemy, know thyself, so it's something like that. We're gonna briefly go over each style. The competing style is someone like Jack Donaghy or Harvey Specter. They're your classic boardroom negotiator. They're out for blood, they really wanna win, and sometimes they might risk relationships along the way. The second type is collaborating, where you really want a win-win solution. A good example of this is Sheryl Sandberg, who during her time at Facebook forged partnerships that were beneficial to both parties. The third type is compromising. I'm not a historian, but one example of this is Jimmy Carter during the Camp David Accords, where he asked both sides to compromise and make concessions in order to reach an outcome. This type works for high-stress negotiations where neither side wants to back down, but they can be too quick to make concessions. The fourth type is accommodating. So this is someone like Roman Roy in Succession. They're really worried about the other side's thoughts and feelings and can be really good at preserving relationships, but may come across as weak. The last type is avoiding. We might not think about this one a lot, but this type is really effective when you need to delay a negotiation. So an example of this could be the TikTok CEO who kept delaying around the ban in order to buy more time, or any negotiator who walks away from the table. So I'll link some resources for figuring out which type you are, but have fun with this. The fifth and last thing is, how do you actually plan a negotiation? We talked about a lot of concepts, but you have to put this into practice. During my negotiations class at Wharton, we prepared for every negotiation by answering these 6 questions. What issues are most important to you? What is your BATNA? Reservation price? Target price? What are your sources of power? What issues are most important to you or your counterpart? What are your counterpart's sources of power? What is your opening move or strategy? And what's your anchor? Now for our bonus, how to negotiate as a woman. Girlies, stick around. You might already know this, but in my negotiations class, we learned that women don't perform as well as men in terms of the economic outcome of a negotiation because they're not assertive enough. However, even when they are more assertive, they can come across as too aggressive. This is a losing game, so you have to change the playing field. Here are 3 things that can help women negotiators. The first one, I know a lot of you are gonna hate to hear this, but it really helps to have someone negotiate on your behalf. Studies have found that female executives perform much better in negotiations when they're negotiating on behalf of someone else, because in that situation, they feel more empowered to be assertive and don't come across as aggressive because they're speaking for another person. Even when you are the negotiator in the room, you can use this bias to your advantage. So in a salary example, if you're talking to HR, you can say something like, my team leader asked me to talk to you about my compensation. I hate that this is the world we live in, but I just want to give you the tools that's going to get you the the outcome you want. The second way, if you really want to be the person in the room and not have someone negotiate on your behalf, is to frame the negotiation as a collaboration. We talked about negotiation styles, and a lot of women tend to be collaborating, compromising, sometimes even accommodating rather than competing and aggressive. So if you can frame the negotiation as working together to solve a problem, that's going to help you. Number 3, use a high anchor value. We talked a little bit about this, but if you anchor high, you don't have to negotiate as much later on and come across as too aggressive. These strategies have helped me so much in my life and career, and I hope they do the same for you. And don't forget, negotiation is a skill that comes with practice, so incorporate it into your daily life, at work, even talking to your partner, maybe even with your family. If you want to learn more about negotiations, 2 of my favorite books are Getting to Yes and Never Split the Difference. And if you found this video helpful, like and subscribe for more tips and advice for your nonlinear career. Drop a comment below with your biggest takeaway or any questions you have. Happy negotiating!